Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. If Anthony Davis only gets one game in the back-to-back, which game should he play? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always going to be free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with 14,000 other Lakers fans, NBA fans, talk about the team, talk to us. We love to take your comments. We love to use them on the show. So thank you for all the support you're giving that channel, which just keeps growing, and we really appreciate it. I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. $20. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. So a couple of things that we want to get into. Obviously, Anthony Davis. This is the front end of the last back-to-back the Lakers play in the regular season tonight in Utah, tomorrow against the Clippers back in Los Angeles. And as we, or at least are recording late on Monday night, we have not gotten any word as to which one of these games he might play. So we'll get to that in a second. Some of the decision-making, Andy, could be related to who plays. Utah is fading. And they got a lot of dudes who are going to be on the sidelines for this game. Lauri Markkanen, their star player, is questionable with a hand injury. He has missed more games than he has played over the last 3 or 4. Walker Kessler, their outstanding rookie center, is done for the year. He is in the concussion protocol. Jordan Clarkson is not going to play. He hasn't played in weeks. Colin Sexton hasn't played in weeks. These guys are unlikely to see any more action the rest of the year, I think. Knowing that, you can look at this two ways. The Clipper game is obviously the one that matters more than anything. That's the bigger one. The flip side is the Utah game in some ways is almost more damaging. It's sort of like the Houston thing. Like when you lose to teams that are terrible, it is the most winnable game. It is the game that really looks worse losing. So if you could pick one for him to play, which one would it be?
Well, first of all, just to add a little bit of context and I guess a bit of contradiction to what you had said before, we have gotten an indication at least which game AD is likely to play if there's only one, because he is currently listed as probable for this game against Utah, along with D'Angelo Russell. LeBron is questionable. At this point, I expect LeBron to be questionable for all of these games. Unless there are signs of a setback, I don't worry about that at all. So they're already setting up for AD to be playing in this game, if there's a choice to be made at all. And for what it's worth, there may not be a choice to be made. To the best of either of our knowledge, this has not been publicly confirmed that AD would play both ends of the back-to-back. But around mid-March, Chris Haynes on his This League on Cup podcast with Mark Stein said the following quote, "I know Davis has received some flack for sitting out versus Houston, just with the stakes the Lakers are in, needing each game they can get in the latter stages of the regular season. But the way it was explained to me," Mark Stein, he's talking to Mark Stein, "is just about how powerful medical staffs are of today's NBA, how powerful they are today. I know a lot of players get criticized for load management, sitting out games, doing all that stuff, but the medical staff has a large part to play in it." So the way it was explained to me was AD had to pick which back-to-back to play in, the back-to-back most recently that they played in, or the one that's coming up, April 4th in Utah, then April 5th versus the Clippers. How it was explained to me is AD will play in that back-to-back. So that would be his first back-to-back since returning from the injury. That would be the first back-to-back he's playing in. Hopefully he doesn't suffer an injury before that, but if he's healthy, he'll play in the back-to-back, which they need that set of games at that part of the season more than the last set of the back-to-backs. It should be noted AD actually did have an injury, that in-game ankle turn, but he managed to play through it. And for
right, should have no negative impacts on Sunday
No.
against Houston.
That said, though, if you had to pick a game, and I think it is a no-brainer, you would play the Clippers. I don't even think there's an argument to be made that you would play Utah over the Clippers, because against the Clippers, that is a full one-game swing and gives you the most direct possibilities of getting yourself into the playoff as opposed to the play-in. The Clippers have been vulnerable. They've lost 4 of their last 7. They're having tons of rotation decisions. Like, Ty Lue has really had a difficult time landing on what he wants, and this is beyond Paul George's absence. Ironically, they've been losing during this period where Russ has been playing pretty well for the Clippers. Laker fans sometimes know how that goes. But, you know, they lost to the Pelicans recently in New Orleans. Big game for both of those teams. Kawhi Leonard had 40, and Westbrook, I think, had close to 30, and they still lost that game. So the Clippers are vulnerable. Brian, to the point you brought up about how it would be totally deflating to lose that game against Utah like it was recently against Houston, my counter to that would be F that, win the game. I mean, like, really? I mean, that's the counter.
Win
the damn
put
game.
that out there because I say this only because, like, we talked when, and context matters. You know, when you sort of think of these things 3 or 4 weeks ago when we're going through the schedule, we're looking at their second half. It's like you point to the games the Clippers are playing better. You start pointing to the games that are like, here are the ones that, it's really critical you don't lose to the bad teams because you have to make it up against the good teams if you do. And at the time, that made a lot of sense because, at the time, especially, you could lose a game to the Clippers. You could lose a game to the Suns, even if AD plays. I think, to your point, Utah at the time, especially you're coming out of the break, you're after the trade deadline, still playing pretty decent ball, still have a fairly whole roster. They are a much better coached team, I think, than Houston, or at the very least, they are further along in their development. In terms of having stability and guys who are deeper in their understanding of the game, a little more mature in that way. It's not fair of me to say that Will Hardy is automatically a better coach than what they're getting in Houston. Not really what I mean, but even with
sure
that, just
how it sounded, Brian.
Just the talent. I mean, I'm not who is it? I'm blanking. But there have been some complaints from Rockets fans. Just saying, but that's not really the point. The point is this version of the Utah Jazz with probably no Markkanen, but definitely no Clarkson. Conley has been traded, and you're basically Kessler is out.
Possibly no Sexton.
Sexton he's not. I'd be shocked if he played in this game. He hasn't played in a month. And you're looking at THT revenge game, okay, and a lot of dudes that you probably have not heard of unless you are a diehard NBA player or NBA fan, and so you ought to be able to win that game if Anthony Davis doesn't play. And you are correct; the Clippers are vulnerable, but they are better, and so if you can pick one, you should be able to win that game against Utah without Davis. And you might need AD a little bit more for the game that is more important anyway. I completely agree with you.
Which gives me hope, by the way, that AD being listed as probable for the Utah game, because I can't imagine that the Lakers coaching staff and the front office don't see this the way you and I do, because frankly, it's the most obvious way to see it. Mm-hmm. That gives me some hope that Haynes's report from mid-March is accurate, like that it actually is what had been predetermined, that this was always part of the plan. And it would also mirror what you and I have been trying to emphasize a lot during this period, was that an active injury is a fluid situation, which means they can't treat it as fully healed, meaning the back-to-backs were not a given, even if AD is on the court, and that has nothing to do with AD not wanting it bad enough or being soft. He's already said it's not a pain tolerance thing. It's a medical thing. But it being fluid means it could develop in a direction where the reigning Western Conference Player of the Week could potentially play in these back-to-backs, which would be huge for the Lakers.
Yeah, it's one of these things where, we'll talk more about this coming out of the break. It's like, is it weird to me that he couldn't play in a back-to-back, whatever it is, like 8 days ago, but he can now medically? Yeah. I mean, but I don't understand. I don't know enough about the injury. It's not been explained in ways that necessarily make a lot of sense. That would seem strange to me. But I would trust that the Lakers are not suddenly, now that they are, and I'll bust out some math here in a second. I trust that they are not suddenly going to start playing fast and loose with Anthony Davis's injury, now that it looks very much like, at the very least, they're going to be in the play-in. So we'll talk about those things next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. And years ago, some friends of mine and I, we wanted to go see LL Cool J in LA at the really last minute, had no idea how to score tickets. So we ended up buying from a scalper. They were fake. And it was only through a totally random, totally lucky bit of serendipity that we were able to get into the show. But I vowed after that, never again. And buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. That's why I love Game Time, the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports and music and comedy shows and theater near you. They got killer deals on last minute tickets and the best price guarantee, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun. And it's easy to browse through the Game Time app for the upcoming events in LA, like, I don't know, maybe the NBA playoffs. And I love how they offer images of seat views, and that's key because there's nothing worse than a bad angle. They got the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and the Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That is confidence that they are giving you the best deal possible. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps. Tickets go directly to your phone and you are set. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So here's some good math regarding the Lakers and their playoff hopes. This from our friend Cranjus Basketball, Tim_NBA, the Lakers Exceptionalism Pod. Really ought to be somebody, if you're a Lakers fan and you don't know about this content, he's a great follow and you should be doing it. So this from the Basketball Index, which is his site, I believe. Correct, Andy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's his thing. The Lakers updated playoff odds based on their Western Conference forecast. Missed the play-in entirely. Remember in the last segment, I said the Lakers really look like they're going to make it into the play-in at the very least. The odds of them missing the play-in with 2 games left against Utah and the Phoenix game and the Clippers game, 4%. So 96% chance they're in the top 10 somewhere. 9-10 for the play-in, 25%. 7-8 for the play-in, 46.5%. And top 6, 25%. That could go up with a win tonight. So, to the point I was making going into the break, like, this is the wrong time to suddenly get cavalier about Anthony Davis's injury. So, maybe he is. I mean, if the doctors say you can play in one that enough time has passed, and he can, I won't claim to understand it, but I'll take it, and I will assume that they are being relatively careful.
Yeah, I'm sure they are being careful because there really is something to be playing for on the horizon. Also, again, the idea of this being described as active, and look, the Lakers have been, I think, too cagey and too opaque for their own good, and particularly for Anthony Davis's own good, when it comes to fans understanding what's going on with AD's foot. But from the bits and pieces that they've put out or hearing AD talk about it, it has always sounded to me like it was determined that the foot had healed up well enough that he could play, but not to the point where they felt confident that he could play in back-to-backs. AD one time said that the foot needed 24 hours to between games, basically to keep from flaring up. And it makes sense to me, even without understanding what's going on in any true medical sense. The idea that I'm sure AD is continuing to do treatment on this foot. I'm sure there's strengthening going on in part through playing, that he could have reached a point now where they possibly feel confident with him.
I mean,
playing.
that would be what is going on.
Right. Assuming
if he plays in both.
Maybe he doesn't play in the Clipper game. If he doesn't, frankly, I think they made a massive mistake, but
right. I mean, look, he's getting, I was sort of thinking about this, like, is there like something with the extra day off? Like, does it make a difference if he gets, would you want the extra day off going into Friday, or would you want him to have an extra day off, before Wednesday's game? Like, at this point, he's played every other day enough times. You're like, I'm not sure why that would, I don't have to understand it. All I would do is just take it as a really good sign that the Lakers are really coming together in more ways than one if he really is able to play in both of those games. So, I mentioned those odds of the Lakers making it in. Like, they're sitting, if you haven't looked at the standings today, nobody played on Monday because the national title game. The Lakers are going to start Tuesday's action a half game out of the fifth spot. So, you take care of business during on Tuesday. Now you are, you have the same amount of wins as the Clippers, and that game is essentially, at the very least for the fifth or the sixth. It's actually even gotten to the point, Andy, and I thought this was hysterical. There are people, if you go to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel for Monday's show, because we were talking about seeding, we were talking about different scenarios and whatever. There are people actually officially talking about trying to rig it so the Lakers get in the sixth spot. And in the sixth spot, you are probably going to avoid Phoenix. You stay out of the Denver half of the draw. Like, it is, you're going to end up on the Sacramento, Memphis, and then, like, I don't know, whoever the 7 is or something like that, like that part of the draw. And I'm not condoning or condemning the thought process here, or which side you want to be on or not. Although avoiding KD and Booker and Denver probably seems smart if you can. Only that what I find hysterical about this is like the idea that 6 weeks ago, Lakers fans would be trying to scheme their way into the best half of the main playoff draw. Like, not like, oh my God, how amazing would it be if we get there? But like, let's see if we can get this done the right way. It is both funny, but it is also an incredible indicator of how rapidly things have turned around over the last few weeks.
Yes, to quote the poetess Alanis Morissette, isn't it ironic? Like, this is not the place where any of us expected to be, a month or two ago. I mean, the thought was after the trade deadline, you and I, before we even saw the team play, we were very bullish about what Rob Pelinka had managed to do at the deadline. We weren't sure there was enough runway to make it happen. And then obviously once LeBron was hurt, and that really starts throwing at least theoretical wrenches in the works. Mo Bamba gets hurt, like D'Angelo Russell's missed some games. So right. I don't,
it becomes like, hey, there's still a chance here, but like, it's, it's going to be tough to move. Like, if you can get in the top 10, given everything that it's now in your way, like, that's good work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I've always said, and this I think has proven to be true, and I think may actually be the case if the Lakers end up with a playoff position. I'd always said they can't make the playoffs by definition without playing well. Just because, even acknowledging that there have been some teams that have struggled more down the stretch, the Lakers just had too much ground to make up. It would have been impossible for them to back into the playoffs. Like, that's not going to happen. And as it turns out, the Lakers managed to play really well despite a lot of obstacles being thrown their way, which again just speaks to how much better constructed this team is than it was in, say, early January or the start of the season. Basically,
everything up until the trade deadline.
Well, I mean, really, starting with
at least
acquisition
until the Hachimura trade.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to say, with all of that acknowledged, don't get cute about this. Win your games and play whoever you end up playing. Don't get there's
keep in mind, like you miss this plan by like one game. Like, you screw up the let's try to slide in the. I agree, 6 is better than 5, probably. The way it all plays out. But you miss it by a game, you're like 10th. It's like you might be 11th. So be careful. Don't take the basketball gods. While they've put a lot of injuries on the Lakers, it hasn't been perfect. Basketball gods have looked out for them over the course of the year. Like they've slowed down the rest of the conference to allow the Lakers to continue to, like, they're 2 games over 500. We're talking about them being a 5 seed. That is not normal.
And I guess also too, we've seen evidence that the basketball gods can be awfully spiteful to the Lakers when they've done whatever the hell pissed them off. I don't know what it was, but they've been awfully angry at the Lakers for a while.
It is on balance. I think they've been cool. It's a perfect
from 1980 on, just aces.
Right, but I even mean this year. Like I think they've been on balance pretty cool. Like every once in a while they remind you, who's in charge here, because that's what God. If I were a god, I would do that too. Just every once you got to remind people who's in charge.
They've been cool, Brian, but they've had a lot of suffering along the way towards coolness.
They're it's definitely sort of an old. The basketball gods are a little more Old Testament this year than new. I understand.
There's been a lot. Even if they've offered carrots, it's felt like there's been a hell of a lot more sticks until the last month and a half.
They're more like whacking you with the carrot, I think is sort of, and they may not be ripe. I'm not sure. One more thing. We talked a lot about Rui Hachimura, obviously, after his fantastic game on Sunday and a really good defensive effort on Friday that helped swing the game, and noted the sort of the chemistry with LeBron James. And there was a really good piece, a story at Silver Screen and Roll that was put out by Alex Regla, who always does great work, and talking about D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, some of the chemistry that they have together. It got me thinking about another benefit of LeBron coming back, of D'Lo getting healthy, and all this stuff beyond just winning games this year. So I want to get into that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp, and life does not, unfortunately, come with a user manual. And when it's not working for you, it is normal to feel stuck. And navigating life's challenges, whether you're talking about professional or emotional, can bring on anxiety or uncertainty, whether you're talking about a career change, a new relationship, becoming a parent. And I can speak with experience about how much therapy has helped me during a really difficult period in my life for me and my family, and sitting down and talking with a professional was a game changer. And BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, accessible anywhere, 100% online. There's no waiting room. There's no traffic. Plus, it's affordable. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. And if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. That connection is really important. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Okay, so Alex writes in this story, again, you go read it. It's filled with video clips. It's filled with all kinds of stuff that really shows kind of both what the Lakers are doing offensively, but really the ways that D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves work together, the way the skill sets mesh in this new starting lineup. And to me, there's a lot in here that reminded me of what we were talking about on Monday with LeBron and Rui. And it's not exactly the same thing, because D'Angelo Russell is, he's not what you would traditionally think of purely as a role player. Like, he's a little better than that. I think, is in a higher category of that. Austin Reeves, I think, is a better player overall than Rui Hachimura. My opinion. Other people might disagree.
No, I agree.
But I think most people probably would agree with me there. LeBron is LeBron. Rui is definitely a role player. But what really got me thinking is like you start to see these combinations, and one of the really important benefits of LeBron, for example, coming back earlier than expected, and the Lakers getting an extra 3 or 4 games that they might not have otherwise gotten, maybe even more than 5, 6. If LeBron comes back on the last day of the season, whatever, and D'Angelo getting healthy enough to be able to play again, is the Lakers need as much data for next year as they possibly could. Because when LeBron, for example, was out, Hachimura looked a lot less viable as somebody you might want to pay $8 to $12 million to keep around. The way he's played since LeBron's come back, the way you see the plus minus with those two guys together and the combination that they put in, the kind of what that lineup looks like and what other players you might put around it. Now Hachimura looks definitely like maybe somebody you would want to give $10 million to, or 11. Like, they needed that information. And if the Lakers had gone into the offseason without it, without seeing Reeves and Russell together, without seeing LeBron and Hachimura, these different, it would have hurt this year, but it really would have hurt next year too, in ways that, it'd be sort of hard to, a little maybe out of mind for right now, but I think are just critical.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, I guess it matters. I guess it depends on how confident are you in Rob Pelinka's imagination and, ability to see the full picture of a roster and the full value of guys that aren't stars, and, being able to see some of this just, in I don't know, theory as opposed to just purely in practice, because I think it's pretty obvious that if you were given a choice between running back a roster that, if nothing else, makes sense on paper, even if you hadn't seen them all with LeBron, you had seen enough evidence of them playing well together without LeBron, which in some respects is even more impressive than playing with LeBron. Like, maybe it's more trenchant.
Right. No, I think broadly that's true. And like,
right.
I'm a person who thinks, like, for example, they should bring Beasley back despite the fact he hasn't played well at all.
No, sure. But the worry that I think you and I would have, and I think a lot of people who cover the Lakers would have, certainly a lot of fans would have, is that this organization would fall back on its star bleeper tendencies. And if they got word through back channels that Kyrie Irving was willing to take, I mean, I don't even know if it's below market value at this point, because I've prefaced this by saying, I don't think what is happening in Dallas is his fault, because I don't think that's accurate. And based on hearing people who cover this team, whether you're talking about Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs or Tim McMahon, who covers the team for ESPN, like, Kyrie he's not been the problem. He just hasn't been the solution. And a lot of the problems go well beyond what you could do with Kyrie, other than them being in some ways a byproduct of
the trade.
Trading
right. They
for
gutted
Kyrie.
Their defense and they gutted their depth.
Right. But like Kyrie, like, as much as I've been very, very open with my thoughts of I would never give Kyrie a long-term deal because I simply don't find him reliable on a bunch of different fronts, I want to be fair. I have seen no indications that he is the problem in Dallas. The point being, though, I don't even know what his market value would be after all the turmoil that's happened in Brooklyn and then going to Dallas and clearly not looking like a panacea automatically. But the fear any Laker fan would have is that this organization would, at the end of the day, fall back on wanting stars, and that maybe there would even be pressure from LeBron and AD, go get stars, particularly one that LeBron won a championship with 7 years ago.
I agree. I mean, but I would think, even accepting that I don't think that they're going to go that direction, particularly just given how, it's not even the Kyrie thing, just the lessons of what's happened in Dallas apply to Lakers. Like, it's like, again, this is what happens when you gut your depth. It's not just about stars, you would think, especially with role players. LeBron coming back, for example, moves Vanderbilt to a slightly, you use Vanderbilt differently
Yeah.
Because Vanderbilt is another guy whose effectiveness kind of waxed and waned a little bit depending on where he's put.
He really has needed LeBron to be back to be slotted most effectively, 100%.
Yeah, and because if as much as people like him, as much as people like his contributions, his energy, the actual impact. He has got a lot of games. If you go back and look at the box score, where it's just like the net ratings and the plus minus and all that, a lot of shorthand or whatever is bad. Minus 20, minus 24. The effect,
without LeBron available, he was not able to be utilized as a wing defender, which he's much better at, much more disruptive, and in a lot of ways game affecting than having to defend as a power forward where you can get overpowered.
Right, right, of course. But the point of it is that if you take, when you have guys who are role specific, the same player playing with the same attitude and the same energy around three different guys can look completely different.
Yeah.
Troy Brown can look completely different depending on who he's playing with. Or Reeves has kind of grown out of that a little bit, but there are other guys kind of up and down the roster when you get into these role guys, and seeing them in together is really critical, because there are other guys who might not function as well with the stars back. THT struggled with guys who took the ball out of his hands because he wasn't as good when he didn't have the ball. Well, he isn't going to have the ball as much with the Lakers. I mean, that's why even now, with him putting up big numbers in Utah, the trade when they made a lot of sense, because what the hell were they going to do with him? And so, all I'm saying is the Lakers are fortunate that what we're seeing now with an intact roster and this starting lineup that is 2-0, they're 3-0 with LeBron back, and and all these things. I'm sorry, 2-1 with LeBron back. They're going to benefit over these last 4 games, not just this year having the group together. It is really important data for next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even having said that, I think in a lot of ways, just the pretty stark dichotomy of choices would basically dictate that you bring back most of this roster, and then if you want to reconstruct it again or reconstruct parts of it, fine. Running it back allows you more options to actually do that. If you're dissatisfied for whatever reason, you're correct. Information never hurts. And getting this sort of information, getting enthusiastic information based on what we've seen. I mean, I can tell you now, there are a lot of fans excited at the prospect of running this roster back as much as possible. I don't blame them.
Yeah, there's still a lot of information that they're missing, and at $10 million, I'm sure they'd want to see it. But to me, he requires a little bit less imagination, and you already, I feel like, kind of know what he might be. So they just have to make a decision there. I'd bring him back, if nothing else, the $10 million salary slot. But anyway, all right, we'll see what happens after Tuesday night's game, whether the Lakers take care of business against the Jazz. They really ought to. That is a depleted and fading Jazz team, even on their own home floor. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show. See everybody after Tuesday's game.